That's good enough. I can't be bothered to do more than that. I've got to make a fire because I can't spend all day in bed, nice and warm as it is. I need to get up. Right. That's kindling, that is. Yep. It's very funny. I haven't cleaned up anything. I haven't emptied the ashtray. I can't be bothered. If it doesn't light, I might, or I might just give up. I just gotta get a fire going. So this new respiratory disease that came out four years ago, it's not very fun, is it? Certainly makes breathing hard. Yep. Now, I think Alphabet Cow asked me about 0 point energy last time, and I really don't have much to say on the matter. The information about it is scarce, often the subject of ridicule, and if you can't try to find information about it, it's often debunking it and saying how great solar and biomass, but biomass is just a fancy term for a coal power station that's been converted to burn wood. In the case of, say, for example, Didcot, we have Didcot Power Station in South Oxfordshire, and that used to burn coal. It now imports wood from Canada, which, God, the colours in this are weird. Occasionally it sort of flickers blue. No idea what that's about. I'm sure the importing wood from Canada makes sense somewhere, but to me that seems less environmentally friendly than transporting coal from Wales to Oxfordshire. But you know, that's what's doing it, and that accounted for this month 10% of all power produced in the United Kingdom. Nearly 16% was produced by nuclear, 5% renewables, 75%. Is that right? No, because if I've so far accounted for 30%. Oh yeah, and the remainder is gas. And that doesn't include the power which we buy from Belgium, Norway and France. Because we don't produce enough power in our country, even though we've got plenty of energy resources. But there's no political will to develop those resources because, no, that would be bad. So what types of 0 point energy are there? Well, I mean, there's something I keep hearing referred to as scalar energy. No idea what that's about, but apparently it can cause earthquakes, so, you know, take that with a pinch of salt, because again, I got no way of verifying that. There's theoretically, it's possible to get energy from if you have two perfectly flat surfaces in a vacuum and you move them close to one another, eventually they'll be attracted because of a vacuum force. It might have something to do with cold welding. And if you keep those things pulled apart, they'll continuously be pulling towards one another. So that's an interesting phenomena. No idea what that's about, but I think it's related to cold welding. If you get two flat bits of metal touching one another in a vacuum, they will weld to one another. Apparently that doesn't happen on Earth because the oxygen in our atmosphere creates an oxide layer. Well, either way, it doesn't happen on Earth. Unless you do friction welding, but friction welding is hot. I mean, there's cold fusion. Cold fusion's talked about. I mean, one of the things that's very interesting about that is when the bubble collapses in water, it emits light. And studies have shown that as it collapses, it produces a brief flash of heat. This is something in naval warfare which is known about, because they talk about how if you have cavitation, it's very noisy. So you can't go that fast, because if you do, your propellers will just cause cavitation, and that's no good. Although apparently there is this thing called supercavitation, where you create a bubble of steam in front of a torpedo. The idea being that it can travel through steam a lot easier than it can travel through water. Again, very noisy because it's creating all that steam. I think there's a danger this might go out. Well, we do have a little bit of fire. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close it. I wish I could say more about Zero Point Energy. I wish I could say, oh guys, look into this company, look at their perpetual motion machine. They explain the concepts underlying our reality. What would be nice is if we could have more discussion, more insight into ether and how that affects things, because apparently a lot of Tesla's work into these things was just saying like, well look, the energy's all around us in the ether, you just got to put a tap into it, and then that converts it into electricity, which is a more useful form of energy for us. I mean, here's an idea, right? What if you could tap into the magnetosphere of a planet, and via induction you could siphon energy off of that? I mean, ultimately it will slow the planet down, but I think you could get away with it for a few million years. So how would you go about tapping it? Well, I'd assume there'd be a difference in voltage between the ground and the sky. So maybe with a sufficiently large antenna you could tap into the energy. But there's got to be more to it than that, because otherwise we just all those pylons would be generating electricity, and then if they're generating electricity, why do I have power stations? I don't know. One thing I do know is there are forms of renewable energy which are far more reliable than solar and wind. I mean, one which they've done in Spain and it's still working is the solar chimney. It's a large greenhouse complex, and the idea being that it's a greenhouse, hot air rises, they have a large tower for the hot air to rise in, and there's a wind turbine at the top of it. And the nice thing about this is it still runs at night time because the ground below takes time to cool. So that will just work 24 hours a day. And a more small scale version of that is you can use a heat pump from a refrigerator. Actually, you know what, sod it, I'm just going to put all of this in. I can't be bothered to wait anymore. And using a heat pump, you transport heat to a boiler and drive a steam turbine. And if you scaled it up enough, you'll extract enough heat from your media, whatever that is, air, ground, water. You'll extract enough of it that you'll be able to do something with it. You'll be able to boil the water and make steam. So really it's just a case of you take the energy which is already there and you concentrate it. I think they're missing a trick with these ground source heat pumps, because why wouldn't you do that? I mean, most of them, they take water and they just say, oh, we'll use it for heating, we'll make it 55 degrees, and then when people use it for the hot water, they still have to use electricity to heat it up to 70 degrees because of the dangers of Legionnaire's disease. And I thought, why not just have a higher efficiency compressor? I mean, these heat exchangers, it's like I never did refrigeration. I never sat my exam for it, but the refrigerators, they'll get you down to the point where you can make liquid oxygen, and you can certainly get to the point where you can take heat and then compress it. I mean, if you're using water as your refrigerant, we know that it's liquid between 0 and 100 degrees. So again, well, you can get it above 100 degrees if it's a pressurized system, but I keep thinking for ease of maintenance, you want to not have a pressurized system. But I mean, that's how I do it. Get water, nearby stream or something. I mean, in this country they never freeze over unless it's a mini ice age. Pump your refrigerant around, which is water, and take the heat from that and compress it. Yeah. How do you extract the heat from water? Because it's good for carrying heat, but it's like you've got to. I mean, with the refrigerators, the way they work well is you get a refrigerant which gasifies easily, and when it's gasified, it's cold. It's ready to absorb heat, and then when you compress it, it's when it gets warm. So maybe water's not the right refrigerant. Maybe you're looking at ethanol. As long as you can extract some of the heat from the ambient environment and compress it to the point where you can boil water and drive a steam turbine, then it's just a case of you scale it up until the steam turbine is able to power the compressor, and any surplus energy you've got is a bonus on top of that. So it's not free energy because you have to pay for the equipment, and doubtless like with any moving parts, there are maintenance fees, but it's I think that would be a good avenue for the future of renewable energy. And I suppose in addition to that, you could say the nodding donkeys. I don't know why other countries didn't take up the research, but nodding donkeys is again another form of wind power. So it takes the waves, and it's got floats, and the floats they activate bellows, and it just pushes air along a tunnel till it activates a wind turbine. And in the 80s, they said, oh, it's no cheaper than nuclear, which already to me sounds like, well, great. I mean, if it's as cheap as nuclear, let's have it. But apparently there was some shenanigans going on with that study, and it was sabotaged. So maybe it's cheaper than nuclear? I mean, in terms of deployment, it doesn't take 30 years to set up a string of nodding donkeys, as they call them, on a beach or a coast somewhere. And just get them turning bellows to get air going. But no, we're stuck with the worst forms of renewable energy, which are intermittent. We put strange loads on national grid. I mean, often, because I look at the voltage here, sometimes it's been as high as 250 volts. Typically at night it's anywhere from 241 to 247 volts, and we're supposed to be synchronized with the grid in Europe, so we're supposed to be 230 volts, because historically we were 240 volts. Some countries in Europe were 220 volts, and then it was decided as a compromise between the two to make all new electronics operate ideally at 230 volts. I mean, it doesn't matter so much with switch mode power supplies, because they'll just, if you've got high voltage, they'll switch on less frequently. Yeah. Look, I am going to finish this video now. I'm going to sit down and feel sorry for myself, and but at least I won't be cold. So toodle pip.